Hello everyone, welcome to Self-Knowledge. Today we're having lecture number 31 of this set of 50 lectures that have the objective of giving us the information and the techniques so we can get to know ourselves. Today's lecture will be very practical. Actually, this subject, the mechanical creatures, will allow us to discover our own mechanicalness, and we are going to see how all those mechanical reactions that we have continually lead us to act in a wrong way. And this mechanicalness that we all have is what has created and maintained all those vices, all those bad habits that doesn't allow us to awaken. So, in this lecture, we are going to understand how we are mechanical creatures and how to get out of that mechanicalness in which we find ourselves. Since as long as we continue to be mechanical creatures acting under the mechanical programming of our ego, we will not be able to awaken consciousness. So let me check if everything is okay here with the broadcast. So we start with today's lecture. Allow me just a second. Yeah, I think a bit soon. So, why is it said that we are mechanical creature? Well, a mechanical creature is a machine that is not self-conscious, but it is managed by another who moves it or programs it to act in such or such a way. And in the same way, if we observe ourselves on any given day of our lives, we can realize how mechanically we are repeating the same actions, having the same thoughts, the same emotions, the same inner states, and how we always react in the same way before the same circumstances in a constant and repetitive way, moved by the programming or the commands that our eyes or our psychological defects give us. Each one of our psychological defects are manifested through our energy centers, and they manage our human machine, and they dictate us what to do, how to react. And we, as simple unconscious machines, as simple puppets of our ego, we go and we react according to that programming. Every morning when we wake up, the programming of laziness and the programming of anger is activated, and then we feel annoyed because the alarms just rings and because we don't want to wake up yet. And mechanically following that programming of our own laziness, we go and we postpone the alarm, and then repeatedly we have the same conflicts, the same rush, the same delays, the same discussions, etc. And for example, every weekend if we observe ourselves and if we have that let's say programming, we see that we feel sad, or in the holidays, let's say, and then there our eye of loneliness lead us to get depressed, to look for sad movies, to remember that person we lost, and we do the same thing always. Or let's say that every weekend the eye that has us programmed is the spendthrift, or the alcoholic, or the party animal, or the one who seeks to stay hypnotized by watching series or movies, and we constantly repeat that programming every weekend. Each of our psychological defects has us programmed to react to any circumstance in an egoic way. Our lust has programmed us to react with lewdness to any image or any situation of sexual nature, or to an attractive or to a semi-naked person. We see we can easily see how we have this like programmed in ourselves. Our greed, for example, has us programmed to act with fear before the possibility of lack of money, and with desire before the possibility of getting money in some easy way, even if it is not an honest way. And what about our anger or our pride? We are so programmed by these eyes that if someone offends us or criticizes us, we immediately react with violence or with fear, which are the two poles of anger. Anger leads us to react to any situation with impatience, with intolerance, with tyranny, etc. And the worst thing is that we don't realize that we go through life like machines, without the slightest self-control, reacting to various situations in a mechanical and repetitive way, to the commands of our ego, without even becoming aware of it. That is like the sad part of this. And we constantly believe ourselves to be autonomous. We believe ourselves to be free and to be conscious. But actually, the reality is that just as because of our unconsciousness, the law of recurrence is processed in us from one existence to another, as we saw in lecture number 12, in which we saw how this law, the law of recurrence, keep us repeating the same actions, the same lessons over and over again, repeating the same situations, meeting the same people, falling into the same circumstances from one existence to another, until we awaken consciousness, until we self-observe and we eliminate the actors or psychological defects that keep us making that mistake over and over again. And if we do that, then we get the wisdom out of that experience. That same law is processed in us in our daily lives from moment to moment. We live unconsciously repeating the same mistakes and reacting in the same way every day. We live repeating from one day to another the same words, the same thoughts. We constantly carry the same mental chatter. We carry the same psychological song. We feel the same desires. We repeat the same actions. And we fall into the same inner states under the same circumstances. And if we observe our day-to-day, we will discover, or we will be able to discover, that mechanicalness, how the same eyes constantly manifest in us since we wake up in the morning, making us like repetitive machines. The same unwillingness to wake up in the morning one day and the other, the same discussions with the couple or with the children at dinner or during the breakfast, the same altercations at work, the same fear of the boss, the same antipathy towards that person. We can see our mechanicalness even when we are going to the bathroom, as an eye inside us already make us mechanically take the cell phone, to use the toilet while we see social networks or we watch videos. And we can see as every time we feel the need going to go into the bathroom, the same program is like activated in us that make us pick up the cell phone and take it with us. That is how mechanical we are. And what about the daily programming of lust, of masturbation, for example, that at a certain time is activated and lead us to look for pornography, for example, if we don't have access to pornography, it leads us to remember sexual sins, so that we give in and we get to get the sexual energy out of us every day. But to discover that constant mechanicalness in which we live, actually self-observation is essential. If we don't observe ourselves, we cannot realize this incessant daily repetition. Actually, the 5 senses of external perception that we have only allow us to perceive the external things. However, the only sense that will help us to discover ourselves and to awaken our consciousness is that third eye, that is the sense of self-observation. Only by directing our attention to our inner world can we discover our mechanical reactions and can we reflect. Why do I always do the same thing? Why do I always have to react in the same impulsive way? Why do I always have to fall for the same vices or the same bad habits? Why do I always have to answer the same way? If we are actually self-observing in any situation, we can discover how the mechanical reaction wants to manifest, and then we can consciously deny ourselves to that. If we are in self-observation, if we are making the effort to look in our interior, to stay in the here and now, we are actually putting our conscious part into activity. Self-observation allows us to be present, to be living the here and now, which is the only time and the only place where our consciousness can manifest. Therefore, we can divide ourselves between the observer and the observed, and we can actually be able to observe our ego in action. Consciousness is what observes our inner psychological states and can observe when any psychological defects want to lead us to react mechanically to any situation. Then when we discover the defect, when we have that opportunity to actually feel observe the desire that is emerging, the thought that we are having, the emotion that we are feeling at a given time, we can actually, if we can observe it, we can deny ourselves. We can eliminate it, and by eliminating it, we break with that mechanicalness. Let's say that we find ourselves in a situation in which someone, for example, offends us or treats us rudely. If we are in self-observation, we can discover how mechanically we are going to react with fury, with violence, or with fear, as we are going to react as we have always done whenever we have seen ourselves in that kind of situations. And if we can observe it, we have the wonderful opportunity to transform ourselves, to start changing our way of thinking. Actually, if we continue our entire existence with the same, let's say, mechanistic way of thinking, with the same concepts, with the same closed beliefs, always doing the same things over and over again, we can never experience any change inside of us. As that famous phrase that is actually that is attributed to Albert Einstein says, if you want different things or different results, do not do the same things. Or insanity is doing the same things over and over and expecting different results. Then we must begin by reflecting and recognizing that we are not in self-control, that we have no control over our thoughts, but rather that we have been acting mechanically, reacting to life according to the programming of our own egoic conditioning. We must observe and accept that until now we have been nothing more than simple puppets that dance to the rhythm that our ego plays, that we always react with the same way until violent situations. We always react with impatience in the face of situations that involves waiting, for example. That we always react with laziness in the face of obligations, that we always react lying in the face of making a mistake and being discovered. or that we always react with anxiety in the face of expectation. And if we don't observe ourselves, then we will not be able to discover who is driving our machine at all times. Then we will continue to behave in the same way every day, and any possibility of change will be actually eliminated. But if instead we observe ourselves, then we can discover the defects that are leading us to want to react in this or that way, and we can eliminate them immediately with the request to our particular Divine Mother. We can ask her mentally, Divine Mother, eliminate this defect for me. When we discover the defect, and following this procedure of self-observation, discovering the manifestation of our ego and eliminating it consciously, we can begin to humanize ourselves, to stop being machines, because that's what we are. And let me see how to stop being machine. Actually, only by refusing to do what the defect wants us to do, and therefore allowing our unconsciousness to manifest freely and spontaneously, is how can we stop being machines. Each of us, within us, have a conscious part that is love, that is wisdom, that is power, and only by breaking with our mechanicalness, only by refusing to act under the conditioning of the ego, can it begin to manifest and can it begin to develop in us. Actually, there are two very simple exercises that we can start putting into practice to break with our mechanicalness. The first exercise consists of doing every night a retrospection of the day. And in this retrospection, we are going to observe all the mechanical reactions that we had during the day. We are going to take, let's say, half an hour to sit down, to relax, and to look back at our day. From the moment we sit, from the very moment we sit down to do this practice, and back until the moment we wake up in the morning. We are going to observe detail by detail everything we did to discover each one of the psychological defects that manifested, and we are going to recognize right there how they are the same that manifest every day in a recurring way, leading us to always act in the same way, to think, to feel, always in the same way. In this retrospect, we are going to observe each one of the events that we lived during the day, and each one of the actions that we carried out, the words that we said, the thoughts that we had, and each one of our egoic desires. So, for example, doing this practice, we observe that right before we left to do the retrospection, we spent, let's say, several hours on the television or on the computer, watching series or news, and we can observe all the eyes that lead us to always do that every night. We can discover laziness, or the bored one, or the eye of fear or concern that lead us to watch the news to find out what is happening with the war or with the pandemic or with the economy, etc. There we go discovering the defects and asking for the elimination of every conditioning that we discover. If we observe, for example, that before that we were having, let's say, dinner with the family, and we observe how we had the same conversations as always, the same discussions as always took place, and whether they concern for the bills or whether the disgust for the son's disobedience or whatever. We are going to observe all that. How we always react the same way, how we always say the same words, the same thing, how we always feel the same things. And going further, back in the day, we remember when we were at work and that constant flirting situation with a coworker that is occurring every day, and we can see how, let's say, before we were spending a lot of time on the cell phone, postponing work to do, and how this is something that has become very repetitive. And so we are observing our day, and we observe the situation at lunch, and as we said a while ago, when we went to the bathroom, how we did the same thing. We remember the morning, the situation during the breakfast, the annoyance to get up in the morning, or the same defect that makes me open Facebook from the very moment I open my eyes. We are going to observe all that. And there we have a great opportunity, not only to know our own mechanicalness, but also to decide to break it. We ask for the elimination of each psychological defect that we discover, and we make a firm determination not to feed it anymore, to not longer react mechanically according to its conditioning. And the next day, as we have already recovered a lot of awareness from this exercise, the next day we will be more alert. And every time we discover more details of those defects, moving us to feel, to think, to act in such a way, then right there we are going to refuse it, and we immediately are going to ask for the elimination of that defect, and we don't do what the defect wants. That is the key to break the mechanicalness. The night of that next day, we are going to repeat the exercise. Actually, this is an exercise that we can do daily. It's very useful to know ourselves, to change ourselves. And thus, we will see how every day will be like a process of self-discovery and a process of liberation of our consciousness. We will begin to actually transform our lives. And we will discover that a single moment in which you are conscious enough to stop being a machine, if you do it voluntarily, it tends to radically modify many unpleasant situations. We managed to transform situations that afflict us for years, and we can fix also the bad relationships that we have with others, since only consciousness can lead us to experience true peace, happiness, and actually can lead us to experience what true love is. That is the first exercise. The second exercise to break with the mechanicalness consists on focusing on radically transforming one moment of our day. So this is the second exercise. Start by behaving consciously by a small part of the day. So if when we are doing our daily retrospections, we realize that a very, let's say, strong situation always happens, and that it is difficult for us to transform that situation. For example, the constant discussion at dinner, the fighting with the partner or with our children, or for example, a deeply rooted bad habit or advice that we have. What we're going to do with that situation, we are going to dedicate a reflective meditation to that situation. We saw reflective meditation in lecture number 22. If anyone has not seen it, you can look it here in the video section of the page and see there the step-by-step of reflective meditation. And in meditation, we are going to see that situation in detail. We are going to observe all the eyes that are activated in that situation at an emotional, mental, motor, instinctive, and sexual level. And we are going to judge each one of those defects that we are going to discover in that meditation. We are going to be understanding and eliminating them in order to transform that situation, or to transform that bad habit or that vice. the goal is for us to reach that moment in the day and be able to maintain total concentration and total self-observation without identifying ourselves with those defects. That is the goal. Without reacting mechanically as we have always done. So we are going to dedicate to that situation the reflective meditations that are necessary until we reach the complete understanding and transformation of that circumstance. That is the second exercise. And to end this topic, I want to tell you about two defects that are going to be a very big obstacle for us to break with the mechanicalness. And I think it is important to mention them so that we take them into account and we deny ourselves to them. The first of this is laziness. Laziness will not let us make the change. We will have to overcome our laziness, which will generate in us a disinclination to self-observe, to do our retrospection. Will always present us with something more entertaining to do. Will lead us to distract ourselves and to hypnotize ourselves with anything so that we don't wake up. Laziness always leads us to postpone inner work, to fill ourselves with excuses and with justifications. And all this is with the purpose that we never get to awaken our consciousness, and therefore that we continue to be puppets of our ego so that it can continue feeding on our own energy. That is the first obstacle. And the second defect that prevents us from breaking away from mechanicalness is mythomania. Mythomania is that defect that always leads us to believe our own lies, to believe that we are good enough, and to justify our defects as valid. Therefore, it will never allow us to actually and radically judge ourselves and to make a change, because if we are good, we don't need to change. For example, let's say that we have a smoking habit and we discover how that programming is activated at different times of the day. When we begin to feel anxiety, we need the need to smoke after having a coffee, or we need the need to take a break at work to go out for smoke. And we actually start to discover that mechanicalness, that we are programmed by the defect, the smoking defect. But instead of observing and prosecuting that defect, the mythomaniac is inside us, will always lead us to justify ourselves. Say, that's not so bad anyway, or I only smoke one from time to time. And with that justification, we stop looking at this and we continue to be the same smoking machines. Or if what we discover is that we mechanically, let's say, bite our nails, that we have that mania, the mythomaniac inside us is going to tell us that later we can buy one of those nail polishes to stop biting our nails, or that maybe that's not so bad because almost everyone does it anyway. And we continue to do the same thing because of this defect. Or let's say that we realize that we are slaves to the cell phone, that we spend all day mechanically checking for notifications or looking at what people post, etc. And we observe that if we go out of our house and we leave the cell phone, we feel a terrible anxiety. But the mythomaniac in our mind will immediately seek a justification, will find a use for it. And therefore, if we don't observe these two defects, the laziness and the mythomania, if we don't identify them, we will never get ahead with these exercises and we will be condemned our entire existence to be mechanical creatures. So the invitation of this lecture is for us to decide to start self-observing ourselves and to break with our mechanical nature so that we can develop our conscious part. And well, this has been the topic of today. And as always, I want to invite you to the next lecture that we will see next Sunday. It will be a very important topic. Next Sunday, we will be talking about a radical change, and we are going to see, or this topic will allow us to understand the importance of becoming aware of our inner multiplicity in order to make a true and a radical change in ourselves. As it says, as long as a man continues with the error of believing himself to be one, to be unique, to be an individual, it is evident that radical change will be more than impossible. So don't miss that interesting lecture, and if you have any question, you can leave your question there in the chat of the video, or you can write in the messages in the messenger of the page. Sorry. So see you next Sunday, and thank you for watching this video. Ciao, ciao.